Well, we're on.
We
Busted.
are.
Play with your phone again.
I wasn't playing on my phone. I just thought I put it on Do Not Disturb, but I couldn't remember turning my ringer off on the odd chance. One of my people that know how to break through my Do Not Disturb decided that now would be an appropriate time to do that.
Yeah.
As has happened before on the show.
Has happened before, and several times at 2:00 in the morning. So
happy Monday, everybody.
Yeah, that.
There
whatever
you go.
she said, yeah. So we've got a big show. Do we want to talk about the weekend? Nothing really happened over the weekend, did it?
We had a pretty boring weekend, didn't we? Oh my gosh, we did nothing but like housework chores.
Yeah, well, that sucks in itself. So tonight, then, if we don't have a weekend stories,
well, you went for a 4-hour tour through the forest where you got your tickets a couple of weeks ago.
I did.
You did that.
Yeah. So our friend, the first guy who ever got a ticket for going on Dunbar Road, as far as the Dunbar drama goes, he took me in a little side-by-side, and we took off and we went through the trails, and we ran into security guards who blocked both sides of this road, and we were technically legal, and they stopped us from going down a certain road. So we went up a hill, and we saw some young guy, Russian or Ukrainian looking guy in very clean street clothes, way in the deep of the woods. Walking around by himself, who knows doing what. Not much we can say about that. But then we came back down, and the security guards had blocked off, and they even had a dog in their van, and they had blocked off, and they were standing at the road waiting for us to come back. So we just ignored them.
But again, two unmarked vehicles, just a regular family van that we drive, and another like a Toyota car or something.
Yeah. Now this wasn't at the end of the road near the highway. This was in the forest. We had gone way into the woods, and they had blocked off a certain section of the woods. So it gets curiouser and curiouser. So we will keep you updated as that drama unfolds. So yeah, there was that, and then also a lot of 4x4 and deep woods jumping and things like that, going super fast, and it woke me back up for a little bit.
But tonight we have a big show.
We do have a big show,
and we have a guest that won't be with us for the whole show, but he's with us for the beginning of the show, and y'all know him if you've been watching this show. So without further ado,
let's bring on Ed Embry, the farmer who's got to go to bed soon.
No, he's got chores he's got to go out and do.
Chores, and then early morning. So
chores is right. How is everybody? How's Jody and Cris?
We are well.
You sound like you're out four-wheeling, enjoying yourself.
He was. I was doing research.
Well, I mean, it was technically recon and work, so it just happened to be fun at the same time. So
I spent a little time at the hospital and found out I had pneumonia. So I've been under the weather for the last. I've been under the weather for the last 3-4 days. My throat feels, I'm never as good vividly speak wise as I should be, but anyhow, could be a little worse tonight.
So on top of everything else, it's hard for you to talk, I guess. You still getting?
No, I'm good. I'm really good at. I'm a lot better. I couldn't even talk actually on Wednesday.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, we're glad you're getting back to better health for sure.
Absolutely.
And thank you for coming on. We called you like this afternoon, and we said, hey, this big red heifer thing, you're the one who put us onto it. We didn't know anything about it. We felt like we should talk about it because we thought it's starting today anyway. We thought it might be happening today. So we thought we should probably fill people in on this, but we know nothing about it. Fortunately, you do. So we thought we'd bring you on.
Well, not that we know nothing about it, but you brought it to our attention.
I know nothing about it.
He knows nothing about it. I spent the day reading all up on it and watching the videos I watched the videos when you sent them to me way back when. But so you are on to help our audience understand, one, the significance of the red heifer, and two, the significance of it happening possibly between Passover and Pentecost. So today and May 19th.
Correct. So Israel thought they had found a red heifer over the last, 20 years. They keep thinking that they found one. And each time they found one, because it has to have no, it has to have all solid. I think it can have 2 hairs that are not red. But each time they found one, just before they were going to do the sacrifice, it was found out that it had more than 2 black or white hairs.
Right.
They grew these genetically at a farm. Yeah.
Is that how they did it?
They grew these genetically at a farm in Texas. So they genetically, you could say, manipulated so that they could grow these red heifers. They have 4 in Israel. I believe the cost of getting them there could be wrong, but I think it was a couple $1 million that they had helped the Israeli government. Some people in the USA paid for. They're there. They have to be, I believe it is 2 years old to be eligible. And it can't be, I believe it is over 3 years old. So
I actually did a little research on this and printed it off. So the red heifer must be absolutely perfect in its redness. Even 2 hairs of any other color will disqualify it. Even its hooves must be red. It has to be 3 or 4 years old, although older animals could be used, but younger cannot. It must be free of any kind of internal or external defect or blemish, and it must not have been used for any type of physical labor and never been placed under a yoke, not even once.
Absolutely. That's right. So that's what they have these 4 heifers. And they're wanting to sacrifice one. Of course, when they sacrifice one, they'll use the ashes with water to purify the ground where the temple is, and to purify all the instruments, and to purify everything. That's what the ashes mixed with water would be for. I guess the question is, do they need to do this? The answer to that is no, they don't. There's no need to do this. It's a symbolic thing as far as the truth of it is now, because Jesus took the place of the red heifer. Let's say there's no need for the temple to be rebuilt for the Hebrew people to cleanse them from their sins, because Jesus did that, dying on the cross.
So we haven't really gone into what the red heifer is supposed to be for and what the whole ceremony is about. We've just sort of talked about how perfect the heifer has to be, but what do we actually, I mean, what do they want to do with the heifer, and what's the significance of this?
So the significance of it is that they will, like I said, is they will, I don't know what they want to use the right words. Put down.
Isn't it biblical prophecy? In the Bible, they said that in order to, is it Solomon's temple? Am I saying that right?
You're absolutely right. It was Solomon's temple and the temple before. So this will be the 10th heifer that they've actually sacrificed.
Right.
They sacrificed 9 up to now. But then, like I say, the temple was taken down in 70 AD by the Romans, and then from that time on, they haven't had a temple or any, I guess you could say, need, though they think their Messiah is coming back. If they rebuild this temple, they think their Messiah is coming back. So sacrificing the red heifer and getting to purify the Temple Mount and to purify everything, that's what they need the red heifer for purification.
Right.
But the fact that the temple that they're rebuilding is not going to be for God. It's going to be for the Antichrist, or the government, say, crowned person to sit in that place. So they're doing it for all. They don't need to do it at all. There's no. It's biblical prophet. It's prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
It's biblical to them because they're stuck in the Old Testament, and they don't need the New Testament. They don't. So
they haven't read Revelations yet.
They haven't read anything into Revelations yet. No.
Right.
No, but I was reading somewhere that for the Jewish people, for the Israelis as well, that they needed to build the temple so that the Messiah could come back and they would have a godly place to sit on the throne and rule the world from. But then I was reading as well, and I guess in the Muslims' Quran, it also says that as well, that there needs to be a red heifer sacrificed, and then the Lord will come back, or Allah, I guess it is, will come back and will reign from the throne. But then the Christian perspective, it also says in the Bible that the red heifer must be sacrificed, and it is meant to purify or give the temple of purification, so that anybody who comes in there will be purified if they came in contact with a corpse within the last 10 days. So the blood of the red heifer and the water mixed with it will purify anybody from entering. And if you enter and you fail to be purified, you will be cut off from the congregation, because you will have defiled the sanctuary of the Lord. So that's what I got from those three different readings, which I thought was pretty interesting, given Christianity believes Jesus was the Messiah, and the Jewish religion, the extreme part of the Jewish religion, or Orthodox Jews, that's what it is. Orthodox Jews don't believe that the Messiah has come, that Jesus Christ was not the Messiah, but the Messianic Jews do believe in Jesus Christ. So I'm like, holy dung, there's so many different things here going on. But right now, what currently sits on the Temple Mount is two of the Islam's holiest structures. And
their holiest structure.
I'm sorry?
It's their second, maybe their first or second, it could be argued, but their holiest structure is in Mecca.
Okay.
Yes.
Is their second holiest structure. As far as the Muslim or Arab world, this is their second holiest structure.
Right.
You're right about the
Dome of the Rock. That's it.
The Dome of the Rock. But if you look at the Institute for the Institute for Rebuilding the Temple.
Yeah. The Temple Institute is what it's called.
Yes, the Temple Institute. They're saying that all faiths will be able to worship in this new temple that is going to be built. All faiths,
right?
So my thoughts are this: first of all, there's really no red heifer prophecy, as far as the Christian world, that there needs to be a red heifer. There's no real prophecy, as far as in the Bible that needs to be the rebuilding, that even needs to have this heifer. There's no need to have this heifer, and there's no need to rebuild the temple. The Protestant, I would say, world, the Christian world today mostly believes that.
Right.
The problem is that we have this. What would you call it? Sensationalism.
Yes.
As being pumped into this, has been pumped into it for quite a few years. by, I would say, what would you call them?
Would this be our global predators pushing this agenda forward in order to cause more division?
That's definitely for sure. It's mostly the, like I was saying, you have the Speaker of the House, which is in the States. Mike Johnson. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, folks. You have Ron DeSantis, and I can't think of all the rest of them right now because my mind's not as good as it was 4 days ago. But anyhow, you have a bunch of those conservative people that have been going over to Israel secretly to back this rebuilding of the temple.
Right.
So those people are, I would say, sensational because, what the speaker's name again?
Mike Johnson.
Mike Johnson is said to be a minister, a Christian minister. But if he's a minister, he doesn't know the facts. I would say he's not factual in his beliefs. So, like I say, there's no need to rebuild this temple. It is being pushed by the priests, the Mosaic laws, the Jewish laws, the rabbis. It's being pushed by them. It's being pushed by the elite and it's been pushed by the whole prophecy, a bunch of prophecy sort of people saying, "Oh, this," because I've heard this for now 25
decades.
years.
Yeah, I know.
It's strong that they need the red heifer, and I believed up to maybe 3-4 months ago that okay, well we need this red heifer. This is something that has to be completed because of more of a Christian, a biblical sort of thing. But my thoughts. But truthfully, if you look into it, there's no need to have this red heifer.
Right. It's a little bit odd for that Christians would believe that, considering that the need for blood sacrifice was long since abolished. So,
right. I have something I can read into this a little bit. Maybe it'll help. I printed off because I was looking for something that was good. You know me.
Yes.
Is the important thing to remember in all this is that the Mosaic sacrifices were aborted by the death of Christ, so that no one who keeps sacrificing the Son of God a flesh and opposing him to open shame can be in the will of God in any way. Hebrews 6:6. To continue participating in the rites which looked forward to Christ's death, and therefore by necessity, after the fact, suggests that he has not yet died for us, is something true Christians must have no part in. As Paul says in Hebrews, specifically reference the cleansing of a red heifer as an earthly rite is in no way to be compared to the cleansing sacrifice of Christ. For if the blood of goats and bulls and ashes of the red heifer sprinkled on those unclean sacrifice, as far as the cleansing of the flesh is concerned, how much more will the blood of Christ, who offered himself to the Holy Spirit blamelessly, like the red heifer to God, cleanse our conscience from death, works to serve the living God.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right. So why are Christians pushing for it? And if we don't have to sacrifice it, does it also, but when they do that, they're cleansing the land. Does that politically signify that the Jews are claiming that land?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's causing great strife right now with the Palestinians. They're seeing it as a takeover, more Israeli takeover of the Palestinian land. So they're ready, and I guess you could say they're armed to defend the Temple Mount, so that they don't lose the mosque that's there and the Dome of the Rock, which is there, which the Palestinians have claimed, and it, as I said, it's one, or as you said, it's one of their 2 holiest sites in Islam. So they are fighting like mad, and other people are saying that this could very well escalate the Israeli-Palestine conflict that's going on right now.
Right.
And I think you're absolutely right, Jody. The thing is that I think that what we've learned in the last 3 to 4 or 5 years is that I think we have to realize here is both parties are working to the middle.
Right.
So, as I said, they're saying that all faiths can go and celebrate in this new temple. Last year in Pakistan, all the faiths of the world, many of them, I'm only guessing, but I'm going to say that it was nearly 90% of them got together, and the Pope, including the Muslim leaders, the Hindu leaders, all those got together, and they made a new religion called Christian. It's a mixture of Christian and Islam and Jewish faiths. It's all the faiths mixed together.
Well, Harari's got a Bible for them ready to go pretty soon. So
I was just going to say, this goes along their agenda of the AI new Bible that will be written for every religious party and non-religious party to participate in, which makes sense now. What you're saying about the temple, it'll be a place for everybody to worship with the new AI Bible that they are creating.
It also goes with the Albert Pike letter that we've got up on our website, talking back in the 1800s about disillusioning people. The final war will be against Jews and Muslims, and they've already kind of disillusioned people against Christianity. So when that disillusionment happens, they go into a humanitarian religion, which this new AI Bible will help fill that void really nicely.
So, I mean, they've been talking and working on this whole world church. There's a World Church Association, the World Church. They've been working on it for 20 years. I've been following that. And so, yes, tonight's show is about this red heifer. So we're and when they sacrifice this red heifer, because excuse me, they wanted to do this back, I believe, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And the Israeli government put the brakes on it and said no, they couldn't do it. They didn't give a date, and then the Israeli government opened up and said anywhere between April 22nd to the 28th. Well, the 28th, but then I see that they've extended it to May 19th. And that is to draw the Christian world in.
Right.
Because the Pentecost, that has nothing to do with the Jewish faith, but draws the Christian faith into it, which is weak because they're not up on their facts, and will draw them into this and thinking that, oh boy, here we go, our Messiah is going to come, because they think that their Messiah is going to come, not the actual man of deceit.
Right. Exactly right. And that's where this has some pretty serious biblical ramifications. And we thought this was going to happen today. So that's why we're doing this today.
Most good timing.
Yeah, but we haven't seen anything.
We haven't seen anything, but there's a lot to do with the temple and the rebuilding of the temple and 7 years of peace. And there's a lot in that. And it's all very prophetic and
so even if they, sorry to cut you off, Chris.
No, I was
even
done.
If they sacrifice this heifer tomorrow, that in no way says okay, so what they sacrifice it tomorrow, let's say. What we'll do is it'll likely start a war.
Yes,
exactly, because the Palestinians or Muslims will see it as a takeover of their Temple Mount.
But let's call it, I'm going to go step back. They'll start a prescribed war.
Right.
Prescribed.
Correct. Yeah.
War. So it's going to start a prescribed war. Both sides working to the middle. And but that doesn't mean that the temple gets rebuilt. It could be 10 years from now. It could be 20. It could be any time.
Well, they'd have to destroy the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Qaeda Mosque that's currently sitting on Temple Mount. So there's
Correct.
two buildings that are very significant to the Muslim world that would have to be destroyed in order to build the Solomon's Temple, the third temple.
Right.
So you're right. That would start a war.
And it looks like the other night when Iran attacked, if the Israeli defenses weren't there, then missiles from Iran would have fell on the temple.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. And
that
then
would have been interesting. So like I say, both sides are working towards the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Because biblically, this has got a little bit more significance, because I know I don't want to put my tinfoil hat on right away, but anyhow, you can check it out biblically. Abraham, I want to get the lineage right, but there's two brothers, which was Esau and Jacob. And Esau had sexual relationships with the same people that make up the Arab world or the Palestinians.
Okay.
So you have a Jew or a Hebrew that's now half, you could say, half brother to some, or we don't know how many, of the actual Muslim world.
Right. Okay.
We know that Abraham had two sons, one which was, so this would be, there's Ishmael and Isaac. Isaac was where the Jewish line comes from. The Ishmael's where the Arab line or the Muslim line comes from. Isaac had two sons, which were Isaac and Jacob. And Isaac didn't listen to God, and he had relationships with all those ites, the Canaanites, the Ammonites, all those ites, which are the same people that make up the Muslim world. Okay,
right.
So there's a lot to decipher there, but I mean the main thing is that they don't need to rebuild this temple. The temple that will be built by God himself will have no animal sacrifice.
Right.
There won't be any need to cleanse it. There won't be no need to have any waters cleanse it or do anything, because God himself is going to be sitting in it, and he already sent his son to die for us. So there's no need to cleanse that final temple. This one is a false temple, and we have to think about it as that. The problem is it's going to draw a huge amount of people in. I think what I learned from the solar eclipse was to put more of my faith in I guess pray more and put more of my faith into and seek God than put my faith in something that is sensationalized on YouTube.
Yeah.
Now there's some definite truths about the solar eclipse that like if you throw a ball up in the air, it's going to come down. I mean, there's some truths about it. There's definitely some truths, but there was quite a bit of sensationalism, and I believe that sort of this is being sensationalized because they want to put us in a place where we think something that is true is totally false, and they're going to definitely use every aspect and all the I see on the Christian what you would call it, Christian things on either on the internet or on that there's a lot of sensationalism being driven about this rebuilding of this temple because it's been long participated. But when you see it, if this happens, definitely the Arab world is going to take. They're going to get upset and they're going to attack, and then of course that's going to cause the markets and everything to do very bad things and drive us closer to all the things that we know that and have spoke out against. They will definitely start to come about now.
Right.
My only thoughts about this all is, will they actually? There's some other things that's got to happen, I guess, that will tell us if we're in. And of course, they know this too. You could say if somebody knows that, if the thief knows that, if I know the thief's coming to my door tonight, I'm going to be prepared for him.
Right.
If I know he's coming to my door, I'm going to be prepared to stop him before he gets into my house. That's the same situation with these folks. They know the playbook, let's say, and God's allowing it to play out. But we have to be very clever not to get caught up in the mints of the, let's say, the wrong story or the wrong. We need to make sure that we don't get caught up into that sensationalism. That's
right. Wrong narrative. So bottom line is, you think that this might just be used as a false premise for continuing or escalating the war for many reasons. One of the things that we keep talking about is it's also an excuse to amp up the Marxism on the home front and around the world and create chaos within the organizers on both sides of this thing. So
absolutely, they got $100 million. Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan's got $100 million now, right? And other countries are going to give up. We've been giving up money. It only drives us deeper in debt, and it only makes our problems, our woes, even worse. It's sensationalized. You see people with the Ukrainian flag, and nothing against Ukrainian people. There's Israeli people or anybody, but it drives up sensationalism, and that's what they want.
Right.
Yeah. Senior Canuck here is saying most Christians will believe in the lie because of a lack of scripture.
Exactly.
Correct.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Good.
We've got consumerism in church now.
Yes, exactly.
So, we have the churches that, excuse me, again, nothing, I'm not trying to, but we have the churches. We know what happened in the last with the COVID-19 thing and what the stand was there.
Yeah.
And I don't really want to go into that that whole, but we know where we didn't get a strong response.
No, and I kept waiting for it, but it wasn't that. I mean, let's go back further to World War II, where you've got Bonhoeffer and Niemeyer, who are very few, a part of a very small group of pastors who were against the Nazi regime. And then on top of that, you go back even further, and we were researching eugenics, and churches were on board with that too. In the southern states, they were all on board. So,
and the Pope fell into line with. And nothing against my fellow Catholic friends, but the Pope fell in line with the Nazi regime too.
Right.
Of the at that time.
So the history, the church has a bit of a history of missing out on the important stuff, for sure.
Exactly.
We have to tighten up our faith and
agreed.
We have to watch what's around us. We have to keep an eye on what's around us. Put the important things that we have in our life, mark them number one important. It's absolutely fun and inspiring to look at all these things. And I think there's definitely something that's going to happen. There's no question about it. When that's going to happen, I don't know. Maybe it'll be, it can be held off again. The next time that this could all come up again would be in October at their next, Feast of the Tabernacles.
Right.
Okay.
So we need to keep our eyes open, our ears peeled, and watch to see what happens and how this goes down.
Absolutely. And if it goes down, I think that's another sign to, all these are signs that things that, it's happened. They're all signs. We need to keep praying and keep getting ourselves ready. Like I said, spiritually, mentally, physically, we need to continue to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Does that put us in a good position where we're on Red Heifer?
I think so.
I think so.
I think we've covered everything.
To be continued anyway. Yeah, we'll check back in if it actually happens. So
we don't need to have 3 shows.
No.
Okay. No. Hey, want me to talk a little bit about what's happening in the the food world, the farm world?
Do you want to do that now, or do you want to come back and do it on another show? I know you're not feeling well, so I don't want to.
No, it doesn't matter. I have it all laid out. It's up to you. I have it. I can talk about it briefly. Or you got something else on the go?
Oh, we've always got something in the back pocket, but if you want to talk about that now, that's fine. Yeah, we can do a little bit of while you're distracted. This is what's going on. We can certainly do part of the show on that. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that this is actually the situation for your food folks is getting worse by every minute. And of course, I don't know how many, everybody's probably heard of the bird flu that's happened down in Texas and the USA.
Yeah.
There's now, in the last 3 years, there's been 90 million birds, which would be commercial chickens, turkeys, have been euthanized. 90 million. Across the world, there's been 140 million globally. So, I don't know what that's
a lot of food gone.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So it's starting to ramp up now. Was a few weeks ago, 1.6 million birds got destroyed in Texas by a company that's the biggest egg layer company. They're the largest egg producer in USA, and that company is called Cal-Maine, CAL-MAINE, Cal-Maine.
Okay.
They euthanized 1.6 million laying hens at their farm in Texas, and then they euthanized 337,000 pullets, which are the birds that would lay eggs in the future. So we have almost 2 million birds euthanized. At the same time, within a week, 1.2 million got euthanized in Michigan. A few days after that, back in Texas, there was a fire at a laying hen facility that killed 2 million birds. All of a sudden, the fire destroyed 2 million birds. I watched it go up in smoke. The situation, you two know me very well. Who do you think owns Cal-Maine? Is the major shareholders of Cal-Maine?
I'm going to trace it back to China.
Okay, you say China. Who do you say?
I know China's buying up all the farms here in Canada, so why wouldn't they be buying up all the farms in the U.S.? So I'm going to say China. They seem to own a lot of our choke points.
Unless it's Bill Gates.
So the 2 major shareholders of Cal-Maine are BlackRock and Vanguard, and they own almost 40% of the company.
Oh, those guys. Yeah, we've heard of them.
Well, it's always BlackRock, Vanguard, Street,
or China.
City or something.
Like in here, yeah, like in Canada.
You know, when I look at this, you know, what's 2 million birds to those guys is nothing. You know, what's happened, of course, is that we now have transmission now in cows, and dairy cows in particular. The bird flu has jumped from birds to cows, to dairy cows.
Has that ever happened before?
Never, not that I know of.
Could this happen without some sort of gain of function shenanigans?
No, but what people are missing and what the reporters are missing is, and I'm not here to turn off people's diets, but what do you think is one of the main ingredients that's fed to dairy cows and beef cows? Well, not the main ingredient, but an ingredient that is widely used in animal feed, especially cattle in the USA, that they're allowed to use and we can't. Actually, we can here, but no one has used it. What do you think that feedstock would be?
No clue. Canola?
I just always figured corn and wheat, hay and grass is what I always figured.
Or animal slurry.
What they actually feed dairy cattle and beef cattle is poultry manure.
Okay.
No way. So by taking out all the birds, they can efficiently, by domino effect, take out all the cows.
Well, they've been doing this for years.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if you want a transmission of a disease, especially poultry is not a very really kind of in a way clean animal in a way. So if you want to, so by feeding, you'll find the pathogens there. Like if you test, you're gonna find them there because they're feeding the manure of an animal to an animal. You're gonna find them in the gut. You getting me?
Of course. Yeah.
So the government in their budget was talking about, remember they were talking about in the budget about baby formula?
Yes.
And bringing in emergency measures, something to do with the baby formula. Now, we just did the show last week, but I'm drawing a blank because we kind of shot through everything so fast. But there was 2 things in our budget where our government specifically talked about being able to fast track emergency measures and not test baby formula, but bring baby formula in under the guise of some sort of emergency crisis or pandemic. So if they are euthanizing these birds due to some sort of flu, but they feed cows the manure from the birds, that is going to ultimately, again, domino effect into our milk supply. And I'm assuming that some baby formulas probably have some sort of a dairy component to it, which then makes sense that they would now need to address that ahead of time in our budget with regards to emergency crisis when it comes to our food supply.
So 2 things there. You're on the right, a bit on the right track, but you're on the right track. I don't want to hit into 3-4 shows here.
Sorry.
So I want to keep moving because Chris will give me the.
We'll just cut you off. I'll just kick you off the show when we're tired of you.
So anyhow, they've been doing this, feeding this poultry manure to beef animals, to ruminants for years. This is something that just didn't start, but they haven't had bird flu in the States for the last 2-3 years. Okay. So but they didn't stop feeding it just because the animals had the bird flu. The manure is still, they still kept feeding it. I just want to let you know that situation. So, so we had 140 million birds globally, 90 million in the USA euthanized. They're both about 1 million in Quebec euthanized, and about 1 million more in the rest of Canada euthanized from the bird flu. What's happened about this now is that in the States, here in Canada, in Ontario, I'll talk from the Ontario perspective. If you pick up birds to have for your own, you have to get those birds registered. And you can grow the chicks yourself. If you're picking them up commercially, you got to have a registration number. If you take the birds to get them processed, you have to give the processor your number. Okay. In the States now, they're going to force all small flocks, everyone, to have their birds registered.
Right. Yeah, they're doing that in BC as well right now.
So because of this action, because of what's happening, all birds have to be registered. So they will know where everybody's food source is.
Right.
Okay. Secondly, the milk situation. So this is now into it's into 32 herds in the United States of America and 8 states, and it's like I say, it's jumped. Maybe I didn't say it has jumped over to 2 humans. So it's now crossed from a bird to a cow to 2 humans.
Okay.
So this will be the next pandemic. Just in time for the WHO treaty that's going to be signed in May.
Correct, and everything points to that. Everything points to that. Second thing, what's happening is in the United States of America, in Canada, it's not allowed. You cannot drink raw milk. I can drink raw milk from a cow if I want to have a cow to feed my own family, but I cannot take that raw milk off my property, or I cannot sell that raw milk. In the States, I believe it's 18 states, you can sell raw milk. But a large amount of course, of all the Mennonite or those Mennonite people all drink raw milk.
Right.
All the people or country people drink raw milk.
It's common in Europe too, I believe, is it not?
Yeah.
Even the Queen has a whole herd of Jersey cows and has her own label and whatever of her raw milk. It's very common in Europe. You can buy it in like a Coke dispensing machine.
Right.
If you start to take, now what's happened already in California, there's a shortage of milk. California is actually the biggest dairy state, if you believe it or not. It is.
Wow.
There's a shortage of milk there. People are not. What I'm being told is they're backing off of milk, not drinking it because it have contaminants. You look at social media, whatever, they're drumming this up. They're sensationalizing it, right?
Yeah.
That's a popular word for me tonight. So that's all happening. The beef cattle price in the States went just crazy when this broke. Cattle prices were just out of this world. I'm going to talk about this but they come back down a little bit. But it's going to drive up the price of milk. It's going to drive up in the States. It's already drove the egg price up, but it's going to continue to drive the milk price up. It's going to continue because one of the problems with this disease is that the cows lose production. So the milk is thicker, and it decreases the cow's appetite, and they have constipation. That's what a dairy cow or a cow get from having the bird flu. Okay.
So Ed, I think what we're going to do is we're going to bring you back because we're going to talk about this and then the several CERNs around the world at the same time. I think we're going to bring you back on and talk about this because this is getting to be a big subject. And I think we'd like to do a proper show on this for an hour because food security seems to be something that's really super important to a lot of people. So I think what we'll do is we'll bring you back and maybe tease a little bit of the CERNs, the global CERNs around the world, because there's more than one. And we'll do that next week if you're ready.
There's more than one?
According to you, there is.
No way.
We know you've been investigating and researching. So, we were going to have you here, what was it, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago to talk about the food supply. And then you got distracted with the CERN and you were like, oh no, we got to put off food for CERN. So, you know what? I think, and I know you've been ill for the last little bit. And I know you're recovering or on the road to recovery now. So if you are good, perhaps maybe next week or the week after, we can bring you on and cover this properly. Because
I don't think we're doing it justice right now. So,
I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll bring you back in either next week or the week after. But if you're ready for it, next week is great for us.
Okay. So I'll send you a couple smoke singles.
Okay.
Perfect.
Sounds good. And as always, it's way too much information you bring, and it's hard to bring it all in. But thank you for all your hard work.
Guys, I appreciate that. I think it was good.
Yeah, and thank you. I know you're under the weather, so thank you for sharing your time with us.
That's right.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay. See you.
Enjoy your chores.
Bye, Ed.
I'm going to do chores now. How do I check out?
I'll check you out.
We'll check you out.
Thanks, Ed. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Holy cow. So much information.
We were not expecting that.
No.
And wow, I definitely wasn't expecting that today. So it definitely gives us a bit of a teaser for next week or the week after when Ed is feeling better, and we can do a full, thorough investigation and bring that information to you guys so you know what is going on. But it definitely helps explain a little bit about what's happening in the budget when our 2 items in our budget anyway dealt with food crisis and pandemics and dairy products.
Right.
Now we know why.
So we promised a 2-parter sort of to this show and the other side of a coin, and we're really talking about the psychological, spiritual warfare. It's 2 sides of the same coin because it's all about lies and deception, keeping you deceived, so you really can't find your true purpose and destiny. And so we thought we would talk a little bit about the biblical side tonight. And holy cow, there's just so much there. And then we've also got psy-ops. So we thought, what a great way to explain one portion of how psy-ops work in breaking down a lie, showing you how the lie works, showing you how the government uses that lie to make up false laws and whatnot. So we thought we can break one down and do a whole anatomy so you can see how it works. We can do a whole cross section on it. So, but you know who explains it better than us?
Who explains it better than us?
Why, Nancy Pelosi explains it better. I can't actually believe this. They let her say this.
And then we call it the wrap-up smear. If you want to talk politics, you call it the wrap-up smear. You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and they'll say, see, it's reported in the press that this, and this. So they have that validation that the press reported the smear, and then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made. And it's a tactic.
So there you go. Just to recap, they create a lie, they plant that lie in the news, and then they point to news as being the truth.
Because
and then
journalists do their research.
Right. And the journalists back them up, and they capitalize on that to push their lie forward in Congress, or in our case, House of Commons.
House of Commons. I was calling it the Rambo wrap-up smear.
Rambo.
The Rambo smear.
Kind of technically, hey?
Kinda. So that's how our government's, one of the ways anyway that our government does smear campaigns. They really truly utilize the media to their absolute fullest potential to market the smear on their behalf, knowing, one, the media have deadlines to make. The media no longer does their own research. They're pulling stuff off of the Associated Press and then just repeating it. And each studio doesn't want to be outdone, so they all repeat the same thing at the same time.
We're going to break it down step by step. Fistman's Fraud, the book, has been gone around like wildfire. That lady who did it is getting all the interviews right now, which is great, because when the Fistman thing came out originally, when this broke, I was on this like hotcakes, and I was actually emailing all of the news outlets saying, hey, you guys are printing lies and you need to pull it back. And not one of them did. So here's how this works. So we're going to break it down using the Fissman story and show you exactly how this wrap-up smear, the smear wrap-up works, just like Nancy Pelosi said. Here's how they're doing it in Canada. So here's let's just back up. So all of a sudden, all of these news outlets started putting together news stories. And this news story that came out that went gangbusters, I think that's it there. Unvaccinated disproportionately risk safety of those vaccinated against COVID-19, study shows. Well, so that means that the unvaccinated are a danger to the vaccinated. And from everything I knew, that's not true. That couldn't possibly be true. So I'm like, well, how did that get printed? And that was Globe and Mail, but it was
but everybody was talking about it. The Globe and Mail,
right? It was
CBC,
a Canadian press
CTV.
that put it out first.
Exactly.
And we'll talk about that in a minute. But Globe and Mail is just one of many. So I went to the source, which is what everybody should do, and that is this study. And here's the study. This was impact of population mixing between vaccinated and unvaccinated subpopulations on infectious diseases, dynamics, implications for SARS-CoV-2 transmission. So there's a study, and I started looking at it and I started pulling it apart. And first thing I found was we constructed a simple, susceptible, infectious, recovered, compartmentable model of a respiratory infectious disease with two connected subpopulations, people who were vaccinated and those who were unvaccinated. So that was the first thing I noticed, that it was not a real study. It was a computer model. Now, remember, we did the OSFI stuff. This was, what did we call it? It was just OSFI?
OSFI.
Yeah. And how
Office
they're creating this model to introduce climate change banking regulations.
Based on nothing but fictitious arguments and opinions.
Right. They made up the baseline. So here's the truth. Now we derive our science from testing against the truth, but they made up the truth.
And they say that they made up the truth.
Right.
It's an assumption. It's a theory. That's what it is. That's exactly what Fissman's study was based on. So a model, which is an assumption, right, or a hypothesis, a theory.
It's a computer simulation. So he plugs the numbers in, he decides the numbers, and he gets all his numbers from data. But the very last one, it says baseline immunity in unvaccinated people. So this is your science truth. Where did he get the number? If you look over on the right, it's an assumption. He made that assumption. And it was Brian Bridle. I saw Byron Bridle point that out, and is that his assumption number actually is backwards. It represents like the 2% of the population that were
unvaccinated.
That were affected. It was 98% success or survival rate, right? So if you actually turn it to the real numbers in society,
which Nia Singh did, because you saw, I saw Byron Bridle's, but I saw Nia Singh's first, where Nia Singh actually plugged in the real life numbers, and it proved without a doubt, because he used the real life numbers that our government had actually published. So he used the government's real life data to plug into Fissman's model and got the complete opposite of what Fissman was saying.
Flipped it. By that study, it made it look like the vaccinated were actually a danger to the unvaccinated.
Correct.
By using real world studies. And you go back here, and he says right in his study, we just assumed this was going to be, so he made it up out of thin air. Right. So that's the number one kind of red flag on that one. And then you look at the competing interest. David Fissman has served on advisory boards related to influenza and SARS-CoV-2 vaccines for Seqirus, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Sanofi Pasteur vaccines, and has served as a legal expert on issues related to COVID-19 epidemiology and the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario and the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario. So he serves the big pharma.
Exactly. He's getting paid by the same people he's being asked to do a model on with regards to their vaccine.
Right.
So huge conflict of interest here. He's a paid partner.
Right. He also serves as a volunteer scientist in the Ontario COVID-19 advisory table, the people who made up all the mandates,
Correct.
The people who mandated the vaccines. The man who sells for vaccines is mandating the vaccines, and his I don't know, subservient, his
Ashley
helper,
Toot.
Ashley Toot, was employed by the Public Health Agency of Canada when this research was conducted. The work does not represent the views of the Public Health Agency. So massive red flag number 2. Massive conflict of interest.
Yeah.
This study is going to 100% benefit Big Pharma.
The people who pay him.
Right. So all of a sudden he's making up numbers to make it look like the vaccines are really good for people.
And he probably made the numbers up because when he used the real live numbers, it worked against him and his employers. So the way that you make things favorable is you have to now make up stuff and keep making it up until, or changing the numbers, keep playing with those numbers until you get them to say what your employers need them to say.
Exactly right. So you make up your baseline. So what is your base truth? We're just going to make that up, and we can do whatever we want with the science after that. So they were funded by a grant from the Canadian Institute of Health Research, also a Canadian organization under the banner of Health Canada. And they gave it to David Fissman. So the ethics. Now, here's the thing. How is this actually published in a Canadian medical journal? Is it not peer reviewed? Doesn't have to be, because it was a computer model. It actually wasn't a real world study. And they're using data from real world scenarios, except for the one he made up. And it says at the ethics approval down at the bottom there, because this study involved the use of publicly available aggregate data, which doesn't mention his made up numbers, approval by a research ethics board was not required. So it didn't need peer review or ethics review to publish this in a medical journal.
Well, not just a medical journal, but every single newspaper and news broadcaster everywhere used this fake model to further the global predators agenda.
Right. So here's the stats from its own own metrics. It was picked up by 90 news outlets. 90 news outlets. Now, those news outlets included the Global Mail, which was the article that we showed you. It included WebMD, NIH published it, and then all of Black Press published it. Because what happened here, and I know this because I wrote to the journalist, what happened was this study got published and the Canadian Press picked it up like an hour later. They were waiting for it, and they picked it up and they put it out. Now, Canadian Press
immediately put it out.
Exactly. And Canadian Press is basically, it's a news feed. So all of the other news outlets pick up from Canadian Press, and these journalists, they're not going to vet it because they're under deadlines and tight timelines. So they put this stuff out because they're looking for clickbaity headlines, because
ratings are down and they need to get ratings up.
Their job security is on clickbait, because when those viewers get there, that is more viewers that they can aggregate for their data to show that this is their audience to sell more advertising.
I was going to say, and how do the media get paid? They get paid by their advertisers. Who are the number one advertisers right now? Pharmaceutical companies. So there was conflict of interest written all over this,
from the go,
everywhere.
So that Canadian Press story dropped, and I wrote that journalist, and that's how I know all that went down. I wrote her directly, and I said, this was lies. Here are the lies. And I pointed out everything in the journal. No response, nothing, no retraction. Now, as a matter of fact, I went back to Canadian Press recently, and they had removed... They've removed that story. So the only one that I can find some of the Black Press stuff, because they all ran with it as soon as they saw that stuff. So it went wildfire, and it got into the conversation. It got into several U.S. papers, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. They all ran with this story, and it was all a lie. And so here's where we get into the closed loop. So unvaccinated, Global Mail, unvaccinated disproportionately risk safety of those vaccinated against COVID-19 study shows. Now, disproportionately, I want you to, because this was the word they used, mixing and disproportionately in all of the news stories. So I want you to remember the word disproportionately.
Speaker, if the NDP Liberals won't follow the province's lead and give unvaccinated Canadians their rights back, maybe they will follow our international partners. We know that the Prime Minister values his Playboy image on the world stage more than anything else, as his travels and selfies prove, but our international partners are bewildered as to why the Canadian government is so reluctant to let life return to normal for all Canadians. Switzerland and Greece are removing all travel-related restrictions next week, and virtually no other country requires it for domestic travel for their citizens. So why won't this government follow the science?
Pause it there for half a second. So he's saying the rest of the world now is following their science and they're lifting mandates for everybody. Why is Canada left behind? I don't remember Canada was the biggest lagger, and I think BC was the biggest lagger in Canada.
They were the last country, I think, to lift
exactly
mandates.
Right. So why when the rest of the world is, the census is getting consensus, the rest of the science is is out there.
To the Minister of Health and the Minister of Sport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for giving me the opportunity to highlight a recent study indicating that, unfortunately, the unvaccinated continue to disproportionately risk the safety of those vaccinated against COVID-19, and highlight the fact that in the last week, almost 12,000 Canadians have received their first dose, 30,000 Canadians have received their second, 89,000 have received their third, and over 220,000 have received their fourth dose, Madam Speaker. This pandemic is not over. We all want it to be, but we must continue to follow the science.
His made up science. So they were still mandating people. They were still affecting freedoms, charter rights, and they were still forcing or fooling at this point people into getting their vaccines.
Well, they were still basing everything on Fissman's study, which was a fake, false, assumed study. It said it right in the study, assumed model. And they were ignoring every single doctor. The Great Barrington Declaration was out by then. Over 17,000 doctors had signed it at that point in time. Byron Bridle, a highly respected doctor, was screaming at the top of his lungs. You had all the doctors down in the States screaming. You had so many. Dr. Mark Trozzi was screaming. Dr. Charles Hoff was screaming. Dr. Stephen Malthouse. All these doctors were saying, whoa, 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 slow down. This isn't real. This doesn't make sense. And then you had Nia Singh, who is a lawyer and actually ran to be the mayor of Toronto. He was screaming. He took our government data, real live numbers, plugged them into Fissman's study, and did a whole thing how it actually was proving the other way. The vaccinated were the problem for the unvaccinated. They were the risk, not the unvaccinated.
Right. And just to add into that, you said Nia Singh, lawyer, people would, their legacy psy-ops, your brain's going, well, he's not a epidemiologist or a virologist. Well, Byron Bridle is, and he came with the same conclusion.
Exactly. But all of our politicians who also are not doctors, they continue to rely on the fake assumed model.
No. They used the news articles.
Oh, the news articles.
And that's the thing.
But it was the news articles that put out the fake assumed model and continued, as Nancy Pelosi said, to wrap up smear the agenda. Right. They wrap up the propaganda and smear it everywhere. They made sure every single wall and floor and ceiling and every piece of grass out there was smeared with the shit.
Right. So that's what we're saying. They use the news. They plant these false news stories, and then they use the news to push their agenda. They're not using studies. They're using the news.
Yeah.
Now, here is a doctor from the UK driving this point home.
And therefore, there were two things that I decided to do. The first was I made a phone call to the chairman of the British Medical Association in December 2021. I had a good relationship with him and he respected my opinion. And I spent 2 hours on the phone explaining to him everything that I knew up to that stage about my concerns of the COVID mRNA vaccine. He said to me, Asim, nobody appears to have critically appraised the evidence on the COVID mRNA vaccine as well as you have from our conversation. He said, most of my colleagues are getting their information on the benefits and harms of the vaccine from the BBC. This was replicated by the former chair of the CDC in the United States, Rochelle Walensky, who in an interview later on had said that her initial optimism from of the vaccine benefits came from CNN news report. I say this just to emphasize that we should all accept our vulnerabilities to where we receive health information. Even doctors, policymakers, judges, and lawyers are all influenced and the public massively by mainstream media.
See, that's egregious, because these people, remember we brought up Little Child, who said, you know, they do all these studies and the government can't be disputed because they are bringing in experts and their truth is irrefutable. Yet most of these people are using
fake assumed models.
Right.
Their truth is irrefutable. Their truth is refutable. It is 100% refutable. And what's amazing is that people are starting to wake up to that the truth is refutable, that the government is human.
Right.
And they are fallible. Well,
not only fallible, they're kind of sneaky is just a polite word. They sit on a throne of lies, basically, is what they do, and they use the news to do it. And the news is so insidious. The legacy media, the dying mainstream legacy media, they're dying because nobody trusts them anymore. And eventually the globalist companies are going to have to go elsewhere because they're not going to get bang for their buck. And they know it, and they're freaking out, but it's too late because nobody trusts them anymore.
Exactly.
So, another example of this is this, arson story during the convoy. Police charge one man, search for a second man in arson during occupation in Ottawa. And then the little sub headline says the accused are not linked to the so-called Freedom Convoy, police say. Now this is CBC. So take it with a grain of salt. So it says right at the top, the accused are not linked to the so-called Freedom Convoy. Ottawa police have charged a 21-year-old man with arson in relation to a fire in an apartment building on Lisgar Street on February 2nd. Now here they go.
6.
Sure, whatever. The incident prompted city politicians and some of the building's residents to link the event to the so-called Freedom Convoy protest, which occupied much of the city's downtown core for more than 3 weeks. But the police said, again, they had not uncovered any information that the man charged was involved in any way with the convoy protest which was going on when this arson took place.
Yes, but there were many articles that came out on February 7th. So the fire took place on February 6th, but there were many articles that came out on February 7th blaming protesters from the Freedom Convoy as setting the fire.
We couldn't grab them because they've actually retracted all of those.
No, I sent you a couple.
CBC did not retract.
No, CBC did not retract.
No.
That was the only paper that did not retract.
No, they kind of backed it a little bit, but they kept with the rhetoric. So this is twice after saying the police have not connected it anyway. Then they say the incident happened the same day the city declared a state of emergency over ongoing protests in the downtown core. The following day, during a city council meeting, Mayor Jim Watson included the arson in a list of harassments against the residents and disruptions that he blamed on the ongoing protest. Councillor Diane Deans also cited an alleged detail from witnesses that the front door was duct taped to prevent those outside from entering the building, which she said showed the escalation of protester tactics knew no bounds. Now, the police had already said, we're not finding a link, and the city council and the mayor are like, nope, we're forging ahead. Absolutely, there's a link. And the police are like, no, there's no link. And so a week later or so, all of
our politicians in the House.
Yes.
Yeah.
All of our politicians. Well, no, the newspapers finally said there was no link. We got it wrong. There was no link. But
they didn't say that until after the fact. So February 7th, all the papers were reporting arson due to protesters in Ottawa, arson due to Freedom Convoy, arson due to illegal occupation in Ottawa. And lo and behold, what did our politicians in the House do in order to get their emergency through.
Right. Now, bear in mind, the police themselves had said there was no link, but the news said, oh, there was a link. But the police said, there's no evidence of that. We can't run with that.
Violence is commonplace. We saw an example of this violence, an attempted arson downtown of an apartment building where people started a fire. When they exited, they taped the door.
And an attempted arson, all of which, Madam Speaker, was caught on video.
It has been an illegal occupation that has been harassing people in residential areas of Ottawa. People don't feel safe in their own homes. There have been reports of attempted arson.
Canadians are also concerned hearing reports of an attempted arson in the lobby of a residential apartment building.
Because we see hate speech, we see illegal acts such as arson.
The incessant honking, the arson attempts.
The incessant honking, the arson attempts.
An attempted arson of a residential building in the occupation area.
We've seen the active sabotage of 911 emergency call lines and even an attempted arson.
Other alleged crimes have even been more egregious. Ottawa police are investigating the attempted arson of a downtown apartment building. The situation persists, fueled in part by foreign funding.
We saw reports of attempted arson in some of the buildings.
And it certainly does not include arson or pushing into a residential apartment building and barricading the exits with handcuffs.
The arrests for conspiracy to murder, attempted arson of a residential building.
Over the past 3 weeks, we have watched assaults, attempted arson.
They have been living in fear that their apartment buildings may be torched by arson.
Seen assaults, attempted arson, widespread harassment.
There's been attempted arson with the attempt of handcuffing doors shut so that if a fire started, people would be burned alive. And
never handcuffed.
Death threats.
People
an attempted arson.
A building had an attempted arson where the doors were taped shut. Another building had occupiers attempting to handcuff the doors.
There are reports of attempted arson, bomb threats.
Hate crimes, misogyny, arson.
Horns honked all night long. We saw thefts and attempted arson.
So there you go. There, you know, it went from duct tape to handcuffs, none of which was real. Now
arson, bomb threats.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Now,
as the police continue to say, no.
Right. Now let's break that down here. These are all people justifying why they broke the law to beat truckers,
to bring in the
and
Emergency
freeze their
Measures
bank
Act.
accounts, and justify suspending people's rights and freedoms. They're all justifying it because they're using this arson thing, which is
the
clearly not true, without asking the police, by using CBC. Basically, they quoting CBC. So these are people in charge of the law who aren't even close to educated on what's going on, and they're going around suspending rights because they read a CBC news article, which had already been caught lying several times, including like this was Russia funded and all that stuff. So CBC has been caught several times, and they're still quoting CBC. So there you go. There's their Nancy Pelosi smear wrap up in a nutshell.
Exactly. They wanted this to end. And really, to end it, all they needed to do was come out and talk, but that wouldn't fit their agenda. So they smear everything based on media lies, and then they continue to ramp up the media lies in order to get their Emergency Measures Act through, in order to get their agenda through. They just continue the smear wrap up, as Nancy Pelosi called it.
Exactly. So,
and
that's two examples. Now here's one more example of them coming straight out and talking about what Nancy Pelosi's talking about.
Katie was like, quote, "We don't want to debate legalities anymore," end quote.
Now let's explain that. This is Jody Wilson-Raybould, of course. She's talking about the pressure she received from the Prime Minister's office and that she wasn't going to budge.
Regarding the SNC Lavalin inquiry. Right. He wanted her, as the Attorney General, to step in and squash the inquiry into the SNC Lavalin debacle. And she was saying, no, my job as the Attorney General is not to get involved, but to allow the police to investigate and bring charges where necessary. And Trudeau, over and over and over again, was pressuring her and her staff to get involved and squash it. And her being of more moral, having more moral code than him and understanding what her job actually is as the Attorney General, said, no, I'm not going to. And there's nothing that is going to make me do it. Not even public opinion, none of that, because my job is to protect the Canadian citizen and uphold the law.
Right. So this is a meeting between Jody's assistant and Gerald Butts and Katie Telford, who I believe was Trudeau's communications manager at the time,
Yes.
or PR or something.
Yeah, she
something
worked for
along the
Trudeau.
communications area. Anyway, so here's that meeting. Eventually.
They keep being like, we aren't lawyers, but there has to be some solution here. Mojag, I text. So where were things left? Jessica, so unclear. I said would of course let you know about the conversation, and they said that they were going to kick the tires with a few people on this tonight. The clerk was waiting outside when I left. But they said that they want to set up a call between you and the Prime Minister and the clerk tomorrow. I said that of course you'd be happy to speak to your boss. They seem quite keen on the idea of you retaining an ex-Supreme Court of Canada judge to get advice on this. Katie Telford thinks it gives us cover in the business community and the legal community, and that it would allow the Prime Minister to say we were doing something. She was like, quote, if Jody is nervous, we would, of course, line up all kinds of people to write op-eds saying that what she is doing is proper, end quote.
Op-eds is opinion editorials. That's your media. So Katie Telford telling Jody Raybelt's assistant, don't worry about it. We will get a bunch of news media to write opinion pieces saying what she did was right and that was how you followed the law and protected the Canadians by actually doing something illegal. But don't worry about it, because we'll cover you in the opinion editorials.
Right. Now, here's the thing. They know it's illegal. So I did communications for the provincial government, the BC provincial government, and I was asked to do the very same thing. I was asked to set up stories with a blogger, a well-known blogger in Vancouver, and then point to those stories later as confirmation the government's on the right track. I said to my boss, is this not unethical? And she goes, oh yeah, you should be going home and showering with bleach after this. I'm like, I see. Long story short, I didn't last long there. So I think I was only there about another 2 weeks and then I left. Yeah. So they know. So they know it's unethical. They know it's wrong. They joke about it at the press junkets. Yeah. They know full well what they're doing is completely unethical and completely wrong, and they have no problem doing it. And that's psy-ops are a very complex set of operations, but this is one way that the government works with the media to set a bunch of lies, to change public opinion, to change course on society, and get away with more crap, basically.
So the foregone summary conclusion is the media is the virus.
Media is the virus. And, it's a cycle. It's a machine. If you take one hub of this machine, it won't work anymore. And I think we should focus a lot of our attentions on just getting rid of the mainstream media once and for all. Now, that's a very huge conflict of interest for me to say, because then they'll be looking to alternative or authentic media to move forward. So
conflict of interest.
Yeah. But I'm not getting paid to say that. So at least there's that.
Yeah.
So
Michael, you got anything to say? Bring him in.
Oh, against his will.
Against
Hi, Michael.
his will.
Oh, you're eating too. Yeah.
We can't
You're
hear
muted.
you. You're muted again.
That's what we get for not warning you ahead of time. Yeah.
Yeah, I've probably got a few things in my teeth here, but
all good.
Yeah, no, not much to say, but I guess this is kind of leading into the fifth generation warfare.
Exactly.
And that kind of makes me think back to the Cold War, and I think that the Cold War never actually ended, and it was never about Russia versus the United States. It was the first real propaganda war, and it was for the minds of the people. I did find a little paragraph here from alphahistory.com, and this is talking about the Cold War, but it's very poignant to what's happening today. So we have political propaganda was prevalent through the Cold War, but reached its heights in the 1950s and 1960s. During this period, pro-American values were promoted in film, television, music, literature, and art. This was usually done openly and with little subtlety, particularly in material produced by governments. As time progressed, the themes and methods in pro-Western propaganda became more subtle. Governments produced less of it themselves, instead relying on film and television studios to incorporate acceptable ideas and values into their product. Many of the radio series, dramas, and sitcoms made in America during the 1950s celebrated the distinct advantages of living in a prosperous capitalist nation. The benefits of things like having the nuclear family, school, community, obedience to parents, and loyalty to the nation were openly promoted.
That sounds like a communist wrote that to me.
It does.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Capitalist pigs promoting family. What the hell?
If only they would go back to promoting family instead of promoting women in the workplace and single momhood. You don't need a man, right? And don't worry about it. We will take care of your children as the state. In fact, we are going to open up more primary care spaces for your child. And in fact, we're going to start them going to school at the age of 3.
Yeah,
you don't need to be at home. Get the women in the workforce.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So that article basically says exactly what we were talking about. The media is the virus. The government now knows they don't have to put out the propaganda themselves. They can just use the media, whether it's TV, whether it's commercials, whether it's radio, whether it's the newspaper. The media will do the work for the government. They just need to give them one little clip of whatever it is they're trying to get through, and the media will smear it all over the place.
Right. Now, as far as 5th generational warfare goes and propaganda and psy-ops go, this arm of it is kind of getting fairly outdated fairly quickly. I mean, the ways that they control the mind are much more sophisticated than that. But this is a great way to start going, like breaking down the lies, and this is how they do it. And our government has been doing this a lot. And since 2014. I forget what the change is then, but
yeah, I remember following the study of the wolves. Remember in New Brunswick, a small town, they released on official government letterhead saying we've released wolves in the area. Be careful. I understand they went around with megaphones and loudspeakers, blaring wolf sounds, and all in an attempt to understand the psychology of controlling us through fear.
Exactly. Well, we did a whole show on that, actually. And they also were going to do the Ministry of Truth or the Truth Department. They were setting all that up and they abandoned it. All of a sudden they abandoned it. But then they created a strategic communications department within the CBC at the same time. So you tell me where that psy-ops got, and those people all make well over $100,000 within this little department.
Well, I'd be curious to know if any of those people in the psy-op department, if any of them lost their jobs when, over 400 people went down, or if they were the people that got to keep their jobs with the bonuses.
Yeah, because they lie better. Yeah. So.
Well, someone had to pay their salaries, so that's what happened at my job right in December. They fired a bunch of people just so they could balance the books.
Well, they needed to free up the books to get their bonuses. Yeah, Catherine Tate, man, that we're just waiting to drop a house on her, I'm sure. Her and her sister.
Follow the yellow brick road.
Exactly right. Anyway, yeah, so that's kind of anatomy of a lie, a little bit on the biblical ramifications. So we covered a lot of ground tonight. So
yeah, spiritually and commercially, the psyops that happen to keep us distracted, divided, and living in chaos.
Right.
So we really need to understand how our bodies react to these stories, understand discernment, and really, before you buy what they're selling, maybe do a little bit more research, or maybe ask the questions why, and perhaps follow the money that may be connected to what it is they're trying to sell you, so you don't get wrapped up in their smear wrap up, as Nancy Pelosi calls it, or
learn
as
to
I call
pull
it,
those stories
Rambo
apart.
smear.
Yeah, go right in there. Don't trust the story, trust the source. And if the source isn't trustworthy, don't do that. Pick up, know your Bible, pick up your faith, know your enemy, but trust your God, because discernment is going to be all too important going forward. Because I mean, with Sora or Sona or
the AI generated machine right now, everything looks real.
And deep fake, and that's getting better and better. And go rewatch Wag the Dog. So you need that discernment. We're telling you, things are heating up. So you need to know what's right and what's wrong, what's true and what's not.
That's right. Trust your innate instincts. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And if it smells like a duck and sounds like a duck and waddles like a duck, it's probably a duck.
Yeah. That identifies as a goose. All right. So good night, everybody. Thanks for watching. We will see you on whatever day this is. Thursday. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.